Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who keeps getting turned around while he looks for a gold key.
Tim Longo.
That's really more description of my an hour of my time today. I thought I would get further in this game. I did not play it much at all on our week off, and I was trying to cram some in today. And I spent a lot of time in that maze that we'll talk about this time. But yeah,
that gold key was that was
a tricky one. But first, we need to talk a little bit about Discord Game Club. And send some shout outs to Artimage and to Mark Garcia for taking over last week and doing they also drove a lot of people to the Discord, which is great because it was like, oh, I guess they have a Discord, because you get to the end of a podcast where they're doing the same stuff they say every week and you're just like hitting the skip forward, until you're on to the next podcast, I guess. And so, it's so slow growth, but we had 10% growth over the last,
wow,
since that episode came out as a result. Because
good work.
And said, hey, we're on the Discord. So it's a lot of fun. It was really enjoyable to listen to. So major props to both of them, and then also the numerous contributors that they had who sent audio clips of their own or questions and thoughts, and and they kind of read all that stuff, and it was a lot of fun to listen to. So I know you didn't get it on the trail.
I'm the worst. Yeah, I did not get a chance to listen to it, so I feel terrible that I can't contribute to this part of the conversation. But Brett told me over text, and I was amazed, and so I will guarantee I will listen to it before next time. But it was very clever idea that I'm glad we embraced. So. Good work on the Discord.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
No, they're doing great.
I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to listen to it. Yeah.
So there is a Discord, folks. You can go to the show notes and get the link.
We got to beat their record now. How do we get 11% growth?
Yeah, I know. Well, I was guessing, but there were quite a number of new folks joining. It was like, whoa, because I was really not at a computer for most of the weekend, and when I checked in on it yesterday. I was just like, oh wow, there are a lot of people who joined, and a lot of them were saying, oh yeah, I didn't know they had a Discord, so it was fun.
Clearly, people don't listen to you at the end of the.
Of course not. Why would they? I say this
probably
things week after week after week.
Once you start that, people usually probably just stop the podcast at that point.
Yep.
Oh, yep. He's in his outro. Okay.
Yeah, it's outro time. So it's time to move on. Once they start hearing the music underneath, they're like, we gotta go. So. I guess you never hear that, so you don't even know that when we start doing our outro, I put the outro music on.
Yeah. Clear indication that you're done. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it runs out.
I'll admit I do similar things with podcasts, so
yeah.
There's a cue.
Yep. That's a whole
time is finite. You gotta move on.
That's right. All right, well let's continue our discussion of Eye of the Beholder, not from 1991. We've had a couple of weeks. Neither one of us has made tons of progress, but we do have lots of topics. And despite that, even though I only made it to the end of the second level, and that took way more hours than I expected. And I hope they're not all the levels are going to be like that, but I suspect that there's a certain amount of that's going to happen, right? That's kind of unavoidable.
Well, I think the thing that I realized when I was getting deeper into level 4 and 3 even as well, because when I play, any RPG, but especially ones like this, that there's clearly kind of a finite, they're discreetly placed things, right? I have a real paranoia about missing stuff because I worry that once I get to the end, I'm not going to be at the right level or have the right stuff. So I really have completionist issues with games like this. And I think so far, I'd say if you didn't have completionist issues, each level isn't that bad. But if you feel like you want to see every room or find every item, especially equipment or things like that, then they make that hard on you. Because some of the stuff that you want to find is obviously going to be hidden or behind some sort of puzzle or wall or something like that probably is going to feel a little unfair, and that like at least doubles your time on each level. But like on level 3, you find the down ladder pretty quickly. Like a third of the way through the level, probably, depending on which way you go. So you're like, oh, I could go down now. But it's like, I don't want to go down now. I should not go down now. I'm not ready.
Right. Yeah. So, I need to kill the things on this level. So I'll be ready on the things on the next level. Right.
Yeah. So they kind of get you that way. So but to your point, like most people are probably going to do most of the level, and I don't think they get shorter.
Well, the second one is definitely larger than the first.
Oh yeah.
So the first one is pretty bite-sized. Like I actually thought, and I guess I was taking this from like the original Ultima games. I'm pretty sure those were like the same size each level, right? Same amount of grid, squares.
Yeah. I think that becomes largely the case for this. I think level 2 and beyond is pretty
similar. Yeah. Okay. That might be, and it just, I was so surprised. And of course there was a point at which, I got lost in that, sort of spinner maze or whatever you called it. Where I was like, oh, I don't know how to draw this because I'm not like,
it's rough.
I was drawing for a while. And then at a certain point I just, on my iPad, just like, selected that stuff and just kind of dragged it off to the side and just was like, yep. And in here I get lost. So I'm just going to have to find my way out.
Yep.
And
I just drew a big question mark for that section. I was like, I think I got out with a key.
It's like, I got some stuff, I have some walls and things. And I'm like, I don't even know if I can get to all the space in here. And it was very funny because I got to the point where there are these runes and things on the walls. One is the Orcish rune for something like passage, and then another rune that is like travel. And it's like, okay, what are those about? And I'm not sure. Even like one of them feels like it's a marker for a wall that's an illusion, like you just go right through the wall, and the other one might teleport you. And then there's also other places. I guess maybe if you pass those,
I'm not sure which two. I'm only thinking of one right now, but maybe
there were two different.
Because there's the travel one. So in that particular room, one thing I did kind of like about once you discover a bit of the trick, which maybe you did, I can't tell. There's two chunks of walls, one cube that has the travel rune on it. Mm-hmm. They're basically not mirror images, but they're sort of orthogonally mirror images. You can go into those to avoid the spinners, to move through this, because they're basically invisible walls where if you walk into the travel, I believe the way it works, if you walk into the travel rune, it's basically a fake wall. You stand there, you can go through and basically skip the spinner, so you can circumvent those hallways. Yeah,
I did not work that out. That was what was happening. I basically trialed and errored my way out of there, but it didn't.
Yeah, right.
I didn't figure out what I was doing. Like I didn't solve the puzzle. Like I didn't solve the puzzle construction. But
you got the key.
So, I got the key. Yeah. I got everything I needed. I got all the stuff out of there, I think. Right? I found some other.
So to be honest, you probably did walk through those walls. You just didn't realize it.
No, I did. I definitely walked through the walls
because I don't think you can get out unless you.
No. You need to use them, and I figured out that I needed to use them. I didn't connect that they were circumventing the thing that turned me. That's the part that I didn't figure out. When I finally realized what was happening, it was because I noticed that the compass flipped.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm like walking up, and so to describe this was the third section you start this level 2 with
it could be your first,
right, it could be your first. You start this level with a key, and there are 3 doors. You have 1 key, and each of those doors therefore is going to have to give you another key so you can get through some of the other doors. But I went sort of left to right. So this was the 3rd area I went to, and they do kind of give you a clue that this is what's going to happen to you, because even entering the area,
I like that. I thought that was a good
intersection.
That was good teaching.
They have something on the ground. It's like a sling, and as soon as you step towards the sling in this intersection, you're no longer facing the sling. So you had a clear landmark, and the walls all kind of look the same all the time, which is a definite limitation of the the hardware. I mean, just memory for the amount of images that you're going to have. But so you step forward, and immediately this object that was right in front of you is no longer right in front of you. So you immediately go, that's weird. And you turn, and depending on which way you turn, or, if you've been mapping, you probably know, okay, I was facing west and now I'm facing, south. I need to turn. Oh, look there it is. Weird. Okay, what if I step off it and step back into it? Oh, it does it again. And so you kind of do know going into this maze that this is a new mechanic, right? It's a new dungeon mechanic. But they don't really teach you about the runes per se.
Yeah, there's those offshoot. There's two offshoot hallways with the runes at the end that you can walk directly through.
Correct.
The invisible wall. So they sort of do if you go that way.
If you push through them, yeah.
But you're very likely to go into the maze right away.
Right.
And it's, I mean, it's like, it's a miracle to me that they did the sling thing on the ground, and thought to do that. It's a miracle to me that they put a spinner in immediately to teach you what it was, and then really socked it to you later, because I just think we're still in the early days of onboarding, people into these pretty advanced concepts, where it was sort of like, there's times when I'm like, this is probably like I needed the hint guide to really get through this game, probably. I've used it maybe 3 times so far, just from a speed perspective. But yeah, it's the age of that they don't really care. Right. You're just going to figure it out.
Yeah, and there were fewer games, and you probably don't have a ton of games, and you're probably going to play this one a ton because it's all you have until the next game comes out as well. So there's other market conditions that make it, make it kind of appropriate. Like you want that, it's like, it's a selling point. But it does feel like the answer to a question like, oh, people are really not understanding what's happening in the maze. What can we do to, improve that? And it does harken back to, earlier, D&D module design, as we've talked about before, where often there's a clue to what the solution of the next room is, in the room prior, or there are the elements in there. I can remember it's like maybe in one of the slave pits, like there's a room, and there's a big barrel of vinegar, and that's to deal with the, I don't know, some kind of ooze or something. I forget what oozes are susceptible to what things. But it's because there's going to be a thing in literally the next area, and it's like that barrel is there for you to use on the ooze, or whatever it is, the mold, or the environmental hazard. And you just need to know. You need to know about how the world works in order to do that. And so here they're kind of taking that same approach, but somebody had the thought of like, well, people aren't getting what's happening in here. How do we teach them? And or maybe they just like thought about it in advance. Well, we're going to introduce this element that's going to be key. Yeah, it is kind of a minor miracle that landmark is there.
Well, I think it's I don't know. I think it's playing it critically this time. Obviously, I haven't played it in so many years. Whatever. I don't know.
32 years.
32 years. I don't think I played it right away when it came out, but yeah, 30 years essentially. And then also having played so many games that it influenced, afterwards, it's becoming a very interesting case study to me on, we know it's a small team, because of the era, but it's also, you could hypothetically say it's a bit of a cutting edge game for its time. We talked about Bard's Tale. We talked about Dungeon Master in the first episode and sort of what was happening in the dungeon crawling space at the time. But there's still, the whole concept of using the tools they have to create puzzles, any puzzle. What tools did they add in to give to the player? Like these spinners, like invisible walls. And so they have all these concepts that essentially they didn't call them this at the time, but level designers, the developers, probably programmers even, were putting these levels together, and they're discovering what level design is. You can almost see, as you play the game, you can almost see like them coming up with this stuff, and like, well, what if we did this? Okay, we have these spinners, we have invisible walls.
Another great thing is the teleports in that way. The big sparkly teleport.
Yeah.
Like, I was looking at my map going, oh man, I got to get all the way over to here because it's the only place I can think of that I didn't really investigate fully. There was an elevator, and I was like, oh no, look, the sparkles are right here. And I was even more appreciative having gone there and gotten the gold key to come out and be like, oh, I can just go through the teleport again and get to where I need to go to exit. It was like
early fast travel.
Yeah, it's exactly. I mean, it was just like, oh, that's really, really nice. Like a couple of different things there where I was totally not expecting them to have that kind of like, because the expectation is I'm going to grind away at this game, as we were kind of already talking about. So why would I make it easier for you to do that? But they did. So
yeah.
It was really pleasant to have the key and be like, I know exactly where this goes. Like, that was a great moment.
Well, and I mean, even like, even the translation of D&D stuff to the game, like we didn't talk about this in pre-show, but doors, you can. It's sort of a little bit early systemic design, because doors in a D&D sense, when you're playing D&D that this is inspired by, you can lockpick, you can force a door. They allow you to force doors with strength in this game.
I do it frequently.
Yeah, and then sometimes there's a key, sometimes there's a button someplace else, so just taking one simple concept like doors, which are kind of, as far as dungeon crawling phases go in D&D, like a fundamental concept, doors, right? Like you're an obstacle that different things,
Some might even say fundamental.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Look, it's late.
Yeah, it's late. That was pretty fast, though. I'll give you that. That was pretty quick. So it's just, again, it's in a way, it kind of, I guess it's almost a little bit harkens back to, for some reason, it's harkening back to our text adventure conversations, because it's like they have the parser, they have tools that they have at their disposal they have words basically, and how to create the information that they need to give the player to give them information about what to do, how to solve a puzzle, how to progress forward. And it's just a different version of that. I mean, I guess every game boils down to that to some degree. And I just love how distilled it is, because it's this game, as opposed to the other gold box games, this game does one thing. Right. This is just the dungeon crawl, and I think maybe that was one of the things back when I was younger playing it that I really loved about it, because it was so focused.
Yeah. And pure.
Yeah.
Did you finish it back then? Probably not.
I really don't think I did. I like playing it now. I think it's probably impossible that I finished it. I don't remember finishing it, but I cannot imagine finishing it.
Yeah, yeah.
With 12 levels and as, deep. Maybe I got, like I'm trying to think of like vague memory. I feel like I remember the drow. So I probably got that far, but yeah, that's like halfway, or a little over halfway.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
I'm hoping. Let's fingers crossed this time.
Yeah, we can get a little further. Yeah, we can push through. It's our podcast. We can spend as many weeks as we want on it.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a time sink though, because of the mapping and stuff. But like I said, I will admit I used the clue book, which did come with my version, so I'm trying to use it judiciously. But I did use it maybe three times or so.
Oh, I have. I have it as well, but I've just not been using it.
Yeah. Well, we should talk about one of the reasons I used it was the elevators. I did not. I think that's a counterpoint to what we were talking about with the spinners.
Yeah.
In that I think they did. Obviously, it's hard to be critical of a game this old as they're trying to trailblaze because they didn't know what they didn't know. But that's an example of the opposite because they've used a button that you've seen before and used in other ways to be very binary and do one thing, open a door or whatever. They use the same button in this case, but it acts differently. And you have no indication that it acts differently. And so I just pressed the button once and walked away. I was like, okay, that must have opened something. I didn't even think to press it a second time. And like you, I had done everything else in the level, but I was like, what am I missing?
Yeah.
And then I looked up the clue and like, oh, there's an elevator. I'm like,
in my case, I made an assumption because it said when you push the button, it says like, it feels like the room has moved.
You on the second try, the first time you press it, it does.
Oh, it just closes the elevator door.
Yeah, and it does.
So
I did
press it multiple times. It may say something even then.
Oh, so you went multiple floors. I had
the first time pressed it multiple times and gone to the other floors, but I thought I was going up and down in the dungeon, which is one thing that's a little strange about this second level, right? Is that there's three places. Yeah. There's those two areas and the place with the holes, where you're not actually dropping down to the third level, which is what my expectation from past games, early Ultimas and things like that. It's like there's levels are discrete, and they don't have
I see. You're not going to a pocket dimension. You're going to the third floor.
Right. Level. I thought I was going to the third floor in the dungeon.
Yeah.
And that
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just didn't. I did not understand, like, because there was that other area with all the holes on the floor. And I was like, I was trying to figure out, okay, does one of these holes, like now that I've gotten whatever I could get here, is one of these holes like past the room that it drops me into and somewhere else on the third floor? And that's how I'm going to continue.
That is discrete. Yeah, but no, it's all magical.
It's all self-contained, right? Yeah. And I did not, it took me a while to like work out, oh no, this is just directly above this other space. And then the same with what I'm calling an elevator, because I initially thought, I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to take me back to the first floor or take me down. And then later I discovered this door with a special keyhole, and I'm like, oh, well, that's really weird. I had another key at that point that I hadn't used yet. I didn't know where to use it. There was part of the area I hadn't mapped out, and I finally found that. That also didn't have the key. the special key I needed. So I'm just like,
yeah.
I'm, at that point I was like, well, what do I do? It had been hours between play sessions, so I was like a little lost. Did not immediately think of the elevator or whatever, teleporter room. There was a lot of enemies in there too. So it was like, oh man.
Oh yeah. It's, that's an interesting point because that's the games have progressed in a way that that basically messed you up at that point because you made assumptions on how. Yeah, I guess you already said that, but like in Ultima Underworld, as an example, if you fall down a hole, it does go down to the lower level.
Right.
It's a pretty connected world, is my memory of Ultima Underworld. Like they did a good job at that.
Yeah.
And in this, it's like you said, everything is discrete. I guess they loaded in all separately. And then, so after I finished, so this was while I was looking for a clue on level 4, which I'll talk about later. I looked at level 2. I'd already finished level 2 and I'd passed level 3. And those jerks. So not only is it an elevator, but if you should look it up after you finish level 2.
I have,
did you see in the clue book where they show you a side view of this elevator?
Oh, no, I haven't looked it up in the book. I just meant I'd finished level 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Right. So you could look it up now, but afterwards I was like, oh, I wonder what the map looks like for level 2 and how close I got. So I looked at it. They have a side view. It's the only one I've seen of this, probably the only one in the game. They show you how it works, the 3 levels. And the
somebody
first
was so pleased with themselves.
Oh my god!
So
oh my
pleased
god!
with themselves that they had this in their.
Oh,
game.
for sure. They're like, we have. So the thing
this
is
got to be in the clue book.
It's not an elevator. The way that the relativity of because that the second floor has a pit in it, right? Like you can fall down into the death section. No, maybe you have to take the elevator. Anyway, it's actually a rail. So the thing from a spatial perspective, when you go down the elevator, supposedly you are going down this rail down, and then it goes horizontal for a while, and then it goes to that level. For it to all work somehow from a relativity perspective with the main floor. I don't know why it's that way. I don't know why. I mean, it's just they're just being jerks as far as I can tell.
That's really
of
funny.
So it's not even a discrete up and down elevator.
Well, I mean, I wonder if they had to justify. I mean, I wonder if how they prototyped this game was just like to build a D&D dungeon, right? I mean, it seems like it, right? I mean, your level designer rebuilding a map, and then adding more and more complexity, understanding what the engine could do, and being like, oh, okay, we won't be able to have this much space, so how do we, how do we really get the most out of the space we do have, and a lot of weird tricks like this and like that.
You can totally see it. Yeah. It's like the example you gave last episode. I think you mentioned our interview with Matt Tadaishi with Dark Forces, right, where they're using elevators as state machines behind the scenes to do stuff. It's like that's what they're doing here. They're like, well, we want it to make sense. We want there to be relativity. So what if we just pretend because all they're doing is warping you, of course, right? It's just a teleporter with some audio. They're like, well, but logistically, if this did go down, it would have to also go forward. So it's not just an up and down elevator. It would have to go down and be on a rail. So they call it a rail elevator or something.
Oh my goodness.
It's so funny. But of course, if I didn't look at that in the clue book, I would never have known that, right?
Yeah, no. Yeah. No, I mean, to me, it was just an abstraction. Once I discovered it was not going actually back to the first floor, I was like, oh, this is just something else. Like
it's
just a way to get some additional space in. Mm-hmm. But I do appreciate occasional module or adventure that has a mage's lair or whatever that has some weird
trick
spatial mechanic, right? Of just. Like I did one for my son that was, I didn't come up with this, but there was like a canal through it, and the room at the end like could turn on its axis, 90 degrees at a time. So it's like some of the rooms were upside down and some of the rooms were right side up. And depending on what the mage needed that day, he turned the rooms different directions. And wrapping my head around what that was supposed to be doing was very confusing. So just as this was. So I don't know. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's D&D fun.
Yeah, for sure. We wanted to talk a little bit about the grid versus and the limitations and what you do with that versus the greater freedom of an Ultima Underworld.
Yeah, I don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but I think one interesting thing, especially because we're playing these out, I would say kind of out of order now that we're doing it, obviously chronologically. But one thing that's kind of dawning on me because we had an email last episode, right, where technically the episode before last, where people were asking about some of our seminal games, I think, or something like that.
Right.
And I talked about Ultima Underworld again, even though we have a series about it. So go listen to that if you want more. But I think, this game was a revelation for me because I really wanted to be in the dungeon. I wanted that first person, like holistic experience. And we just talked about how focused the game was. So like, it was like many dreams coming true, even though I had played Bard's Tale. And so that was kind of, early versions of this maybe. But relativity for me, like I'm a very spatial thinker, and relativity for me is really important. And when you're just on this grid and you're just using 2D artwork to represent the motion of moving forward and turning and, moving forward or backward and turning, etc. Like I really have a hard time with that. And I think if I think about the revelation and progression legacy wise from going from this kind of game, which they did 3 of these, and they were very popular, to Ultima Underworld, where it was more of a traditional 3D space 3D generated, created space that had much more relativity, and you're actually turning in a more fluid manner, so you're able to get that relativity better. That was like what I think I was missing when I remember playing this game back then. Is that sense of like, well, it's almost there. Like they're very close. It's the best thing we have, so I love it. And I'm going to play it and as much as I can, and so be it. But I think when Underworld came out, that was when I was like, okay, this is what I really meant,
right? Because
I was turning. You kind of like, we talked about it when we did that series. You're kind of like flying a ship or something, you're almost.
Yeah, it feels a little weird. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very floaty, and you're very like, you're turning and kind of really, you feel the almost fake physics of it. I don't assume they weren't real physics, but
no, they were not.
But you had that sense of polygonal relativity,
right.
with the world, which you don't have here. And so I'm constantly getting turned around in this game and like, wait a second. And I use the compass, but even that sometimes I'm like, if I'm not watching the compass all the time, and I'm mapping, so, I don't get lost for long, but when you throw in a spinner or an invisible wall or some other things we'll talk about in a bit, it's like, what is happening? How do I even map, as you just mentioned, how do we even map this out?
Yeah.
Because I just don't have a sense of the space.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was both. Yeah. I mean, there's no real, it's hard for there to be landmarks because of the limitations of the hardware of the time, right? They don't have red walls versus green walls. Like everything looks the same. So it's very hard to like landmark the space at all. And you also, although you could, I guess, put your own landmarks down, you could drop rocks and things like that if you wanted to, but I don't. I just map, but today I had a moment of panic where I'm like, oh no, I made this section of hallway 1 square too long. And it ended up being okay. Like it didn't end up causing any overlap problems or anything like that. But if it had, I was like, oh man, it's going to take me forever. And, so it did have a couple places where I was like, okay, is this because I messed up that one place, and now everything's a little off or, so there was that, but also, there's just things that you can't do if you have kind of full rotational, movement. You can't do that kind of spinner maze trick, where you have to pay attention, if you aren't locked to the grid and locked to facing one of 4, canonical compass directions. So you do have that, you could try to find a way. And I've actually been like thinking, in my devious game master brain, like, how could I do this? Like something similar with a top down map, like, what could I do there to be different, So I thought that may appear someday, in your game. So,
oh wow, you'd have to like teleport us without us.
I've already figured out.
There's probably some ways you could do it with some clever tokens, clever token work.
I have thoughts. Well, script work probably. Anything else.
Well, but
yeah. So that may happen. Not in the current campaign, but it may happen in the future. So it's kind of cool. It like reminds me. I watched the Psychonauts documentary, 6 months ago, 8 months ago when it came out, and there's a section in Psychonauts 2 where there's an infinite turning hallway. Like if you run around counterclockwise around this pillar or whatever, it never ends. And what a trick that was to do. To make it work. And, but what made it tricky was that you're in the third person perspective, and you have to convey that this is strange, that this shouldn't work this way, that it's somehow breaking the laws of physics, and when it depends on the limitations you have, what you can do to achieve the same feelings, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
When you have the full camera, etc., of that, or even a more full first person camera, as in Ultima Underworld, you're going to have different challenges or have different opportunities for puzzles, and these sorts of tricks than you can have in in something that's purely grid based. So
yeah, that I was going to just say a similar thing, in that I love that it's a great example of, because this game is sort of overall simpler and simple enough for us to kind of deconstruct in this way. It's a great example of the era of technology guiding the limitations of puzzle design and just gameplay design, because like you said, they know you have the cardinal directions. They know that they have that assumption. Those are the limitations. They know what they can do with walls and artwork on walls. That's a limitation, technical, artistic, but mainly technical, memory, whatever. And so there are times when they use that against you because they know that's what their limitations are. They're like, well, if I have them step forward and the artwork on the wall doesn't change, but they moved, it gives you this weird feeling of like, wait a second, I just moved, but it didn't look like I moved.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I just love it. Every game has that. Every game's like, okay, what are, like you said with Psychonauts, what are our limitations? What are our opportunities? And how do we come up with interesting scenarios using all the variables we have? Now, at this point, some games have gotten so complex where it's like too many variables.
Right.
And I won't go into Dark Souls at this time.
Oh, here we go.
But
butter knife.
But no, I wasn't going to talk about butter knife. I just I don't know. It's such a it's so interesting to play an older game like this, because you're more easily able to distill down these concepts that are employed all the time. They're used every game you play, but you don't think about them. You don't think about them as much anymore.
Yeah, because there are a lot fewer, and there's so much affordance, that, yeah. But, I definitely I think about puzzles that I have done for you, and like there was a maze where you were in these rooms with these colored exits, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But you were each in your own ones, so I had to make copies of all of the thing. And,
that's right, I remember that.
And it was like there were 6 copies, of the same space, because I couldn't, it was the only way I could do it. It was like, you literally have each on your own like little track, where you can move around. So, yeah.
Well, and then there's also examples in that same campaign where there were these doors we didn't know how to get through. Yeah. And there was a solution that was puzzly, but I couldn't even tell you what it was at this point, because I don't remember, and it still wasn't totally clear to me. But because it's traditional D&D, we just found a way to go around the doors. We just didn't use the doors at all. We're like, well, just go under the door.
Oh yeah. You spent a lot of time thinking about, and that's, I mean, that's when you have effectively no limitations, right? It's like,
yeah.
I mean, it's hard for me to visualize it for you, but like I would just go and be like, okay, you carved out like this space that I'm drawing in blue, so you can go through here now, and which was great. It was a great, like, I remember setting up that, and thinking, I don't know how to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a designer, right? I don't know what to do there, to teach you what you need to do.
It wasn't.
And I remember telling you at the time, like, I'm a little worried because you're going into this area where I feel like you're underprepared. And the sense in which I meant you were underprepared is like you didn't have the right spells or, whatever.
Yeah.
And figuring out that that's what you needed was like going to be impossible. And then when you found that solution, I was like, oh, thank goodness they're going to actually make it through this. Like, and it was
ironically, huge. It was beholder based too.
Yep, it was.
Which is so funny. But I mean, and I mean, I'm trying to think of, creative problem solving games of modern era, because it's like games are much more representational about real world concepts now. So when somebody thinks of a solution to something, they're thinking, okay, if I were this character, how would I do a thing, to get through it? And I think Breath of the Wild, not having played the most recent one, but I do think of Breath of the Wild as a good example of, we are just going to give you a bunch of systems and rules, and you are going to be able to kind of solve things in various ways if you're clever. there isn't just one way to do certain things. Many things actually in that game.
Right.
And so that's even though they do have puzzles and they do have shrines and things, but you can kind of be creative even in those almost more linear situations about how you're going to get through them. So, it's like their games are dabbling in the space of real D&D more and more. Yeah. But there'll always be rules, though.
Yeah, other games that that I think of in this context of like, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of systems and you're going to figure out what to do with what you're facing are the SuperGiant games. Not so much Bastion, but Transistor. I'm thinking
Bastion's the only one I've played. So
yeah, Transistor is one where you're programming your sword, I guess. Like you have like these basically you put abilities into this thing, but whenever you take enough damage, one of them's taken away, and like now you've got to figure out how to solve the problem the combat you're in, or in some cases a different sort of problem, with just what you have left, and it's super interesting. So it's a really interesting game. And then, I think of like Hades, I guess, is the other one where it's like you have a build, which is based on the abilities and the things you've picked up along the way in a roguelike fashion, So Rogue could be another example of this, but a, way more limited one, where it's like, well, your build based on what you found along the way on this particular run, is also going to influence, how you tackle any given problem. And it's, well, how am I going to use this handful of abilities I have now, which are different from the ones I had last time I was here, or something like that. So,
yeah, I guess roguelikes are in this space because they have to be so dynamic and flexible.
Yep.
So you're always problem solving. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's just in a different kind of way, but I think it appeals to some of the same, same gameplay feels.
It's just chasing, like we've been chasing since whatever. What's the first year of D&D?
76, I think, 75, 76,
74,
maybe even earlier.
Since then, and since then, and since video games have been created, it's like we've been chasing adventure. We played adventure on the 2600, right?
Yep.
As an early example, or text adventures, another good example. We've been chasing the concept of simulating giving players as many choices as possible. And so I just love that this Eye of the Beholder is like another part of that story, a step along the way, right? And we're still not quite there. I mean, there's apparently Baldur's Gate 3 is quite good. It's out now, and and I've played Original Sin 1. Reed and I are almost done with it, but like many hours of that game, so I can see the potential of where the Baldur's Gate will go. But but it's still going to be one of those games, So it's basically a big flow chart. So you only be able to do so much.
Yeah, but it's a really big flowchart.
Yeah, exactly. It's just how big is your flowchart? It's so big that you don't realize that there's actually a flowchart. Like that's really where it ends up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I've worked on one of those. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, I guess the Elder Scrolls games are the other example we could pull from.
Yep, for sure. Let's talk about the D&D translation and food and maybe your poison fiasco.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I do want to talk about that because I don't want to talk about it again. Or I guess I could save it to when you get there, but I think I should do it before you get there. Yeah, I don't know. This point was maybe I don't know how much there's to talk about, but it's been interesting to me because we're playing D&D right now. We're not playing. Is it second edition? Did we talk about this? Is.
I don't even know. I think this is second edition.
I think it's second because I think I saw Thaco someplace, so it's second edition. Thaco, jeez. It's interesting because we're playing real D&D right now, and especially third edition where we talk about sort of the complexity of the rules and just how many just shenanigans are going on there. It's interesting for me I guess I didn't remember how minimalistic this game was when it came to translation because we did play Baldur's Gate, and we talked about the rules translation of Baldur's Gate,
right?
And we talked about the gold box games at those times, but like what they chose to translate and what they didn't choose to translate. For instance, scribing scrolls for mages, right, is in here. Food is in here, but encumbrance, I don't believe, is in here.
No, it's just kind of implicit. Then you can only carry so much. But
yeah, it's the Diablo version,
Diablo style.
Yeah, which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
But also,
that could be all suits of armor.
Yeah, it's still like it. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of WoW rules at that point, or Diablo. Yeah, which and then if you look at the stats page, it's the bare bones version of it, and so it's appropriate, I think, for the game. But something like food, which reminds me of Rogue, because we talked about when we played Rogue, like how much like food is actually your enemy in that game. Like,
yep.
That's your
the pressure. Oh, it's a pressure here as well, right? Because you're low level when you start. You can't rest after every combat because you'll eventually run out of food. You actually need to be judiciously pushing forward, right? If you just like, I went and fought a thing, it took a scratch, I've got to rest. You're going to run out of food before you get to the level at which you can create food, right? Which is like probably level 5 or 6 or something. Not dungeon level, but character level.
Yeah, and I think it's 5. I think I just got my mage there, but I had totally forgotten. But it's like such a funny. There's so many other second edition shenanigans they could go after. Yeah, but food, it's got that Rogue, and I wonder if Rogue was an influence on that. Maybe all the gold box games had food considerations. I don't remember. Or maybe it's from Ultima or Wizardry or some of the other precursors we talked about. I don't remember what Bard's Tale did. But food is always a weird thing in D&D just in general. So I get why it's in there, but it's just such a funny, I just did not remember that for sure. And like fairly immediately being worried about it. Like I actually got down pretty far with no food item, no rations of any kind. And I was like, my characters were all in the yellow, and it was right around the time that I found some more rations. But so they had to tune and balance it to some degree, especially if you didn't bring a mage with you, and they seem to be peppering them. But going back to the previous topic, if you don't scour, and really kill everything or whatever, not only will you not be leveled up enough, but you'll probably run out of food.
Yeah.
And it's just such a funny, I care about so many other things in the rules of D&D that they didn't translate,
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's no, things like alignment or whatever that are seem really core to D&D in some ways, whether or not you lean into it super heavily, or even just like, the sense that the priest has a god. No, they just have divine spells. Like we're not gonna, there's a lot of like stuff that rounds out a character that has that I guess lends itself to role play. But I could see that maybe that's where they made their dividing line. It's just like, is this there, to tell those stories that nobody wants? We want the crunchy combat here in second edition. Just cut all of that stuff away. So you don't need alignment. You don't need the gods. You don't need to know how many pages are in your spell book. Although that's one I guess you could have. We're just going to give you the stuff, and you can just pick whatever spells you want. And, here's the list you can pick from, that are the good ones, or whatever. Or that are the ones that fit with our, our game. And we can design our game around the fact that you might have one of those spells and not some other. And that's one of the things I think that later games like Baldur's Gate really run into as a problem. And as when we talked to, who did we talk to for that?
For Baldur's Gate?
Yeah.
Glenn.
Yeah. Not coming to me.
Sorry, Glenn.
Because I'm a bad person.
It's Glenn, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, I'll put it in the show notes. But talking about like, no, we just, use the fact that you could save scum, to like, you're just going to save before you go. You can save any time and you can, and go. And that was how they balanced the fact that you might make a character who's terrible, like you might, in Baldur's Gate 2, I had a bard because of course I did. And that was not a good decision for that game. The end of that game is way too hard if your main character is not devoted to one of the, more canonical damage dealing types. So I was getting worked at the end of that game. I'm not even sure I finished Baldur's Gate 2 as a result.
Oh my God, I'm so off. James Ohlen.
Oh, right, James Ohlen. Yeah, you're probably thinking Glenn from Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
Always with Glenn and the frog. Yeah, I know. So when, the more options you have, then of course you have this huge balance problem, right? That, in D&D you have a DM to correct for, and when you're making a D&D game, you want to have that sense of infinite possibility, but from a, testing and playability and completability standpoint, you kind of don't, and so here they're just kind of narrowing down a lot of that stuff, winning away a lot of that stuff, and leaving you with just kind of the bare bones. Of course, I'm playing with the starting, like the original party as well.
Yeah.
Like I didn't customize it all, so I don't.
You have, I think there's some multi-class in that party, right?
There is a mage cleric, yeah.
That's
the only one.
Which is the multi-classing. I feel like we talked about this with Baldur's Gate, right? Where multi-classing became such a really big focus in second edition.
Mm-hmm.
And they definitely lean into it here too, because I built my characters for this game, and you have a lot of options when it comes to multi-classing. I didn't use any of them because I hate multi-classing, but it's like, again, with the translation of rules for this game, that's another kind of weird one for them to I guess what they're doing there is they're giving you more options because it's a mage cleric. Like what?
Yeah,
that's ridiculous, But I guess what they're doing there is like, well, we want you to kind of be able to have 8 characters in a way,
right?
Because you can multi-class each of them and have so many different classes.
Yeah, I don't have a thief type.
I don't either.
My ranger has thieves tools.
Same.
And I'm like, why? I mean, I literally went to use it, and it's like, oh, well, only thieves can use that. I'm like, well, why did you?
I haven't tried using it yet. So did you?
I tried to use it on the. Yeah, I went to use it on the gold key door when I had no gold key. I was like, oh, well, there's this weird one. Well, let me try these thieves tools, and it's like, well, you can't use this. I'm like, why did you give them to me?
That is weird.
I don't know. I'm wondering if because I think there are NPCs in the
you
game
will
as
get
well. And so maybe later there'll be a rogue that joins my party, and it's like, oh, I can give you this, which would be interesting, when that happens. I'm very curious, like, because you could make a party of all rogues, that would probably be a bad idea, but you could, and I don't know. I just wonder about like how much they just, waved their hands at it and said, you know what, if the player wants to do that, they're, that's on them. They'll discover our game doesn't play well that way, and they'll go back and make a more traditional party.
I think that is very true. Yeah, I have a vague memory of that before when I played long ago. Is that I think I made a party that was not sustainable at some point and had to start over or something like that. And I'm really dreading. That's where this whole poison story comes in. I'm really dreading.
Well, let's hear it. We're at 53 minutes. It's a good time.
Yeah, I'll just throw it in really quickly. I won't spoil too much about level 4, but because it happened right in the beginning. But I'll give you, I guess this is actually a pretty good segue to this general topic because poison is another thing they chose to dig their heels in on, which is like it's not a good mechanic for this game,
right?
But it probably is accurate for D&D or something, So. Because they have the math going. Also, by the way, resting for 120 days is hilarious to me. But so I was like, okay, fine. But like the math works out from a D&D perspective, so they let it happen. And I did rest for over 100 days a couple times. But anyway, so you come down to level 4. It's spoiler. It's the first level of the dwarven.
The beholder's going to die of old age.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's everyone topside wondering what the heck's going on? Well, I guess they're all
those
dead.
guys down a third of a year ago. Let's go get some other adventurers. Yeah,
that'd be funny if you met another set of adventurers coming down and they're like, "What have you been doing?" So anyway, so you meet spiders. Alert on level 4. The first, depending on which ladder you go down from 3, there are 2 ladders, so good luck. Depending on which one you go down, you exit the ladder, you go forward, you trigger a thing on the floor. It opens up an invisible wall right next to you with a spider. Spider bit both of my characters in the front, poisoned both of them right away.
Wow.
You cannot do anything about that. I had saved for some dumb reason after that because I was like, okay, well, I'm poisoned. There's got to be a solution. I better save now. I don't even remember when my last save was. I didn't want to do something again, so I decided not to go back. And I was like, okay, this will be fine because I'll figure it out. You know, whether it's a spell or like there's got to be some potion nearby or something. None of that was true. I didn't have slow poison yet. I couldn't even memorize it because if I slept to memorize it, I would die. Because the poison ticks down, so you can't rest when you're poisoned. My 2 front characters were both poisoned. Now that's random because you won't get poisoned on every hit. I just got unlucky, and both of them were poisoned. So basically, what ended up happening at that point, this is where I looked for one clue. I was like, okay, is there such a thing as poison cure poison potions? And there must be, because I'm on a level full of spiders. So there are. I found where they were. And basically I had to create a speed run route for myself to get to the potions before my 2 characters died. And that was the only way that I could get out of this predicament. And I had to run it perfectly. I had to fight spiders along the way. I was shooting arrows and throwing knives and not picking them up, just leaving them willy-nilly because I didn't want to spend the time picking them up, and just barely get to the potions. There's 2 potions, picked them up, just barely drank them in time to save both of their lives. Used all my healing potions, all my cure light wounds. It just became this sort of amazing mini game / speed run where I'm just trying to get to this one hallway. And this is also where I discovered, there's random spots. We'll probably talk about this next time, but there's random spots that open walls that you have no idea are opening.
Right.
We'll definitely save that topic for later, but which it did, as you said, it did happen in level 2, and I didn't notice it, which is part of the point of the topic.
Yeah, we'll get back to that one because that's definitely, that's one where they could have worked a little.
They could have done, I mean, and it wouldn't have been that hard, right? They do it in other places where they give you telegraphing that something happened. But long story short, because of my save, and I'm not doing what you're doing, I probably should save my saves off better. I just have 1 save at a time, which is very dangerous. But because of what the situation I was in, it was almost a restart for me. Because if I hadn't figured out that speedrun route, and I'm literally talking, under 20-second margin.
Oh my goodness.
Like it was something like that because they were down to slivers, and the poison ticks down, and there's no way to cure poison without the potions. You can slow it, but again, I couldn't memorize the spell because I would die. So it was an adventure.
I already had at least one of those prepped because I saw it in the list. I was like, I'm going to want to have that. And I do remember that being, I mean, it was even a thing in Baldur's Gate, right? You could be poisoned, and same thing could happen. You could die when you slept. And
was it easier to get people back up though? Like this game, I assume there's resurrect at some point.
I wouldn't assume that.
Maybe not.
But I do think it was, just Baldur's Gate is generally more forgiving. Saves, so you can have multiple saves, lots of saves, as many saves as you want. This one is like, it's 1 save, unless you're playing in a modern era where it's like, you can alt tab out and just copy the directory. I just copy my cloud saves directory and rename it something useful. I mean, I'm not save scumming by any means. It's like I save when I go into a level. I might save somewhere in the middle if I see a monster up ahead where I'm like, I haven't seen this monster before. So I don't know how bad this is going to be. And so, I'll save like those 2 times, and that'll be it for the level. So I only saved twice on level 2, once when I went down, and once again when I think actually.
Oh, well, that's impressive. I do save all the time, but I just have the one save, so it's dangerous.
Oh yeah, no, I don't. I don't even save all the time because I'm like, well, what's the point? It's doing this stuff again won't be that hard, and now that I have the map, it'll actually be kind of a breeze in many cases, but maybe not with that maze.
It's just this was like, because again, you won't get poisoned with every hit. It was the most unlucky series of events, and I did have that pit in your stomach kind of dreaded moment of like, this is done. I'm done.
Yeah,
I can't. I walk down this hall and they're taking damage.
Yep.
So it was just, but of course it was super gratifying when I did it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's kind of in some ways what they're chasing. I mean, there's that poison is just not usually fun.
It's not. It's like food. Yeah.
Yeah. It is. It's just like, it's ticking you away. And like, I mean, a lot of the poison stuff in D&D, moved to be not so much like taking damage constantly, but like, damage to your stats and temporary.
Yeah.
Like you could rest and recover, or you could,
that's a much better
restoration or whatever. Like it's much more fun. It's costing you a resource, but it's not just like, fatalistic, like, well, I guess I have to reload now, which is what happens.
Very old school.
Very old school. And even Baldur's Gate did have that. I can definitely remember being in combat, getting hit with a poison effect and being like, oh, I'm going to get damage every round until I can deal with that, if I even can. And what a pain that could be. So.
It's again relying on the rules or sticking to the rules too much. I think the other thing that dawned on me though, as I was going through the speed run, because I had to go through this section, memorize it, and do it fast multiple times, and fight spiders along the way. I think that the strategy they want with spiders. So this is another thing that kind of comes with controls. The best strategy that they're trying to encourage you to use with spiders is to keep your distance and to shoot them. Yeah. But I'm using a mouse only, and keeping your distance and shooting arrows with the mouse both is nearly impossible because they're too fast. They'll run up on you.
Oh yeah.
So, I think it really is like they want you to be using that number pad, and
if you have arrow keys, you can at least move back,
Yeah, but it's like it's never a long hallway where you're just running backwards.
Right,
it's always
exactly.
I gotta.
Yeah.
So.
Well, if you have a good map, you can use just the strafing arrows and move backwards.
That's true. That's true. I did it a few times. Yeah,
it's hard. It's hard to turn though and see them, like and be able to fire on them.
Right, and then they bite one of your characters in the back, and then they're poisoned, and it's just a whole thing. So
yeah.
Good luck.
Oh, thanks. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, we'll get to that next week. Well, we'll see how far we can fit in this week. It's life is busy, so we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping that there's not going to be too many levels with the kind of complexity that the second level had, which we might have to talk about that structurally too. It's like, well, did you like?
Yeah, why?
Kind of like why do
why
that
level
on
2?
Second level? Yeah, so like is that scaring people off? Like, look what you're in for, I don't know. Or did they really feel like, oh, these are really clever ideas, so we really want to show them so people can see how clever our game is or something like that?
I don't think they thought about any of that.
Yeah. Anyway, well, we have some emails and stuff. I don't think we're going to read it tonight because it's getting late for me.
Yeah.
So we'll skip those and we'll save them for another time. We started a little late recording tonight, so we'll get to it soon. We're not. It's not piling up like crazy, so we should be okay. But you can send those to devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com. Should I even say that we're on Twitter? I mean,
I don't know. DGC is on Twitter.
Dev Game Club is on Twitter at Dev Game Club. And you can find my co-host on Twitch at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
where someday, and there's now a bot for it in the Discord to find out how many days it's been since.
I did start a threads thing.
Oh yeah, okay.
I'm on Instagram, so we could say that.
You can find them there. Those links are in the show notes. We also have a Discord, as we mentioned up top. Again, thanks to Artimage and Mark Garcia. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Herders, and our logo and our merch store, also accessible through the Discord, are by the aforementioned Mark Garcia. So thanks very much to you, Mark. Have fun finding your way down to the lower levels this week, and good night.
Good night.